On January 6, 2021, Bill Barr was in his library, a private citizen once again. His old boss, President Trump, was at a rally near the White House, giving a speech to a crowd of supporters.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Shortly after 1 p.m., Congress began to count the electoral votes that would make Joe Biden president. Bill Barr got a call from his former aide. Turn on the TV.
I was surprised by the number of people who seemed dead set on breaking their way into the Capitol, and the fury in fighting the police. I was horrified by it.
Obviously no way of knowing that that was coming. But looking back at the riot, do you feel like you could have been more vocal, more out there on dismissing these ideas of election fraud, of a stolen election?
But once I left the department, I had no access to information anymore.
But in terms of the environment, yeah, you were out of office, but you still had a voice. And if you and others had been more forceful about that, might that have short-circuited whatever led to January 6th?
No, I don't think so. I think, the story was, the theme was already baked. But you also have to remember, we were playing whack-a-mole. And, one of the things is the president was surrounded by these people who would very convincingly make their case for fraud.
On the day of the riot, Barr issued a statement denouncing the violence, and the next day, another one. He accused President Trump of betraying his office and his supporters.
Are you supportive of the January 6th committee?
Yeah, I think the best way, what I'm most comfortable with, is the Department of Justice doing it through their process. But, this was the Capitol. It was attacked, and I can understand why members of Congress would want to look into it.
Do you think that President Trump was responsible for what happened here ultimately?
I do think he was responsible in the broad sense of that word, and that it appears that part of the plan was to send this group, many of them were obviously rowdy and seemed to be dressed for conflict, send them up to the Hill. I think the whole idea was to intimidate Congress, and I think that was wrong.
But that's as far as Bill Barr will go. This man, accused so many times of protecting the former president, says he is still just calling it like he sees it, and he sees no crime by the president here.
I haven't seen anything to say he was legally responsible for it in terms of incitement.
Barr does write that the president lost his grip and went off the rails after the election. And in his book, he lays blame on the people who had Trump's ear at the end.
You put a lot of the blame, in your words, on the whack job sycophants who fed him a steady diet of conspiracy
theories. Picking out all the good phrases.
Yeah, and does that not let the president off the hook, though, this idea that he's relying on these folks? He's the president.
No, I don't let him off the hook. I think one of his weaknesses is, he is, his id is in control. He'll follow his wants and his desires. And where other people might be modulated by logic and reason, he will push. And after the election, I think there were no guardrails. He had nothing to lose, and he was going to go as far as he could.
Can you tell me, will you talk to the January 6th investigation committee?
Well, if they felt there was some area that was within their purview that I could be helpful, then I would certainly try to cooperate.
So you would cooperate?
Sure.
We're passing the Capitol right now, and it makes me think that there are still people in there, lawmakers, who are buying into the election lie. Is that hard for you to reconcile?
Well, I don't know how many of them actually believe it. I think, a lot of them don't want to make enemies with Trump.
It might be too late for Barr to worry about that. In a 3-page letter to NBC News, President Trump trashed Barr's book as fake and hurled insults at his former Attorney General, calling him a coward, a big disappointment, lazy. Although President Trump is out of office, he is still very much in the news.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly.
President Trump has talked about if he becomes president again, he would consider pardoning some of those who have been prosecuted from the January 6th riots. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think as a blanket statement, that was irresponsible. The people who were shown to have been engaged in this breach, forcible breach, should be prosecuted.
Although he denies any wrongdoing, Donald Trump has recently come under scrutiny for his handling of classified documents after the National Archives recovered boxes of government materials from his home, Mar-a-Lago.
If you were AG right now, would you be investigating that?
To tell you the truth, I probably wouldn't. You have to remember the whole classification system is done under executive order. It's the president. The president decides everything.
After 4 years of Trump in office, Bill Barr's lifelong belief in presidential power remains intact. He just wants a different president. He does not want Donald Trump to run again.
In your eyes, is there anything he could do to win back your support?
In terms of the primary process and who should be the standard holder for the Republican Party, no, he's not, in my opinion, he's not the right person.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.